before we get started this morning, I need 4 volunteers for a game. We're going to see who can do a wheelbarrow race around the sanctuary the fastest. I need at least 2 deacons so I don't get in trouble. No, I'm just kidding. No, it is good to be here with you all this morning. It's good to be able to stand up here and proclaim God's word to our church this morning, right? And so real quick, I know Brother Jeffrey asked earlier, anybody have any more announcements? I have some more announcements, but I don't want to take up all of his time. But I just have a couple quick things that I want to remind us of. First off, next Sunday night, it'll be July the 15th, I believe, during the discipleship, start at 5:30 until 6:30, we're going to be having training right here in the sanctuary for anyone who's involved with kids, preschool, nursery students. Basically 18 years or older, if you're involved with them in any way, shape, or form, you need to be here next Sunday night at 5:30. And I know it's a bad word to use with people who volunteer, but the training is as mandatory can get for volunteers. Because the training is for how to, it's basically scenarios and training on dealing with like sexual type stuff in the church. And so we'll go through some scenarios, we'll watch some videos, we'll do all that type of stuff. And so you might be asking, who has to come to this? I have to come to it. If you are a Sunday school teacher, for anybody that's 18 or younger, you have to be here. If you do cook on Wednesday nights, if you do anything on Wednesday nights with the students, I need you to be here for that. I don't want to sound like the bad guy by saying this, but like it has to be done by September 1st. Because what this training does is it takes the liability off of the church in case something crazy happens with them. And so be here next Sunday night at 5:30 during discipleship time. And this is the last thing I got on this. If you look in the back of the sanctuary, in the foyer there's these forms. And it has all the different types of things that people volunteer for here. Take one with you. Don't bring it back tonight after you fill it out. Pray about it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and bring it back. Basically what it is it's this survey form that says this is where I feel like God is leading me to serve at Midway Baptist Church. And this is what it's not, okay? It's not, well, we have a need here and a hole here that needs to be filled, so I'm just going to circle that. All right, we're not looking for spot fillers. We're looking for faithful servants for the church. And so take one of them on the way out. Pray over it for as long as you need to. We do have nominating stuff coming up. I think the 1st of September is the new fiscal year. So fill it out. Pray over it. Seek God's direction and where you need to be serving here. That's it. All right, so I am a little bit different than Pastor Benji in the fact that I have a whole book up here that I wrote this week for you all. But I'm going to stand up here and, I don't read just straight off my notes, but we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 8 this morning, if you want to go ahead and turn there. And so I want to, I'm more of a series type of guy. Like I like to know where I'm going and stuff like that, because if not, then I'll get sidetracked. And so, as you all know, Pastor Benji's having surgery next week, so y'all are going to be stuck with me a good bit. And so anytime I get up here over the next month and a half, 2 months, we're going to be in a series called The Search for a King. And if you look at 1 Samuel, let me go further back than 1 Samuel. A little bit of backstory, context, so we know exactly where we're at. Okay, so God created everything. He created man and said that man was very good, had fellowship with man, walked with man in the evening times. Man messed it up. We had this unflawed fellowship with God that became flawed and messed up and not the way it was supposed to be. And so, this sin that Adam and Eve committed, it set in motion this perfect plan that God had already determined was going to happen before they even sinned, right? Because God knows everything. And this plan was to reconcile and bring His people back to Himself. And so while the people were waiting for this to happen, right, they were waiting for this knight in shining armor to come in and defeat their enemies and do this and do that. they would wind up taking matters into their own hands. They would say, I've got this. I can handle this on my own. God, we don't really need to wait on you. We can do some of this on our own. That would mess things up even more. And so just 1 Samuel chapters 1 through 7, the quick story. In 1 Samuel 1, we meet a lady named Hannah. Hannah can't have children. Hannah prays to God to give her a son. She says, God, if you give me a son, I'll give him back to you. She has Samuel. Samuel winds up being probably the most important prophet that Israel ever has. And so, we're going to be looking this morning at 1 Samuel chapter 8. And in 1 Samuel 8, we see the Israelites that they're supposed to be led by God. God's supposed to be their king. But instead they were looking for a king who would make them like everyone else. They were looking for a king that would give them stability and security and prosperity. And here's something I just want to you ought to kind of be aware of this morning as we're going through the text. When we look at our own lives, when we really dig down deep and we look and we search our own hearts, we see that we're all looking for a king. We're all searching for a king. You know, it may sound a little cliche, maybe a little cheesy, but, you know, our heart is this throne. And there's always something that's on the throne. And most things bring death. Only one thing brings life. And so just a small litmus test this morning. Look at your heart. You know, what's the one thing that you feel like you couldn't live without? What's the one thing that you have to have? And most of the time when we realize what that is, we see that that's our king. We see that that's what we're giving everything to. The problem is, if that king isn't Jesus, it always overpromises and underdelivers. Only Jesus is a lasting king that does what he says he'll do. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at the life of David, right? Even though some of you may have looked at the headers there in your Bible this morning, and it doesn't say anything about David. It talks about Samuel. This is the backstory, right? It's the backstory. It's getting us prepared for David to come in and become king. And here's the thing that's key to remember about David's life, right? David is not just a cool guy who goes out and slays giants, messes up a couple times along the way. The Old Testament has a ton of stories in it. They're all part of one grand story. They all point to one grand story, one big story that culminates them all. That's the story of Jesus. They're all designed to show that Jesus Christ is the ultimate answer to mankind's problems. That he is what we are searching for. And so this morning, let's dive into the passage. So 1 Samuel chapter 8, and we'll start in verse 1. And I'm going to read a lot, so if you want to stand, you can, but it's going to be the whole chapter this morning. It's going to be broken up, so you'll probably be standing the whole time I'm preaching. We're going to look at three things this morning, though, 1 Samuel 8. We're going to look at what was wrong with Israel's demand, right? The demand for a king was like we'll see in a second. We're going to look at what was wrong with their demand, what was devastating to them about their demand, and what God, through grace, has done with their demand. It's 1 Samuel chapter 8, starting verse 1. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Okay, so unfortunately, Samuel's sons, they didn't turn out like him, right? Like I said, Samuel's probably the most important prophet that Israel ever had. His sons didn't end up being like that. They didn't walk in the ways that Samuel had taught them. They took bribes. They perverted justice. They didn't follow God. And so his sons being that way, it sets up the stage for the Israelite leaders to come in and make this request for something that they've been itching for a long time. Verse number 4. And all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and said to him, Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us, like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." And Samuel prayed to the Lord. Now, so here's a question. So why was Samuel displeased about this? Obviously, he saw that his sons weren't righteous. They weren't living holy lives. And so, it wasn't really this deal of Samuel saying, well, they want somebody else to come in instead of me. Maybe that was a little bit to do with it. But Samuel sees that there's something deeper to this request. It's not just this surface level of Samuel, you're getting old and you're not leading us the way you used to. Your sons can't do it. Right? This is something deeper that he sees, and he's right. This is what the Lord says in verse number 7. And the Lord said to Samuel, "Obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me for being king over them. According to all the deeds that they have done, from the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you." Okay, so let's stop right there for a minute. So let's look at what's wrong with this demand that Israel's made. First, it represents this complete lack of trust in God. And they didn't have satisfaction in God. God was supposed to be their real king. They were supposed to depend on Him for everything. But from the very beginning, that had never been enough. Right? We can look all the way back to Genesis 3. Right? What did the serpent say to Eve? "Eat this and you will be like God." There was never that dependency on Him. That God says, "Depend on me for everything." We always say, "God, no thanks. We got it in our own hands." They never trusted Him enough to just say, "God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do your will, and I'm going to leave everything else up to you." They constantly demanded golden calves. They constantly demanded food and water provided for them in the wilderness. They always demanded safe land conditions. They always demanded security. See, they never just rejected God outright. They never said, "God, we don't want anything to do with you." Instead, they say, "God, we want the benefits that you give us, but we need this as well to feel satisfied with you." There's two ways to reject God. One is to reject Him outright. The other is to say that you follow Him, but to never really depend on Him. Never really trust Him. Instead, you insist on a number of other things being present in your life before you'll ever trust God. Before you'll ever feel secure. I mean, it's easier to trust God when we can control God. Everything that you feel like you need for life is right there with you, right? Your health is good, bank account's looking good, looking strong, got a lot of money set aside for your retirement. Family's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Everything feels good then. We can trust God then, but when everything starts to crumble, that's when we say, "Well, God, I got to do everything I can to get this promotion. It's okay if I miss church for a month or two so I can get this promotion at work. Put in the extra hours, look good to the boss." It's easier to trust God when marriage is good, everyone's healthy. But when one of those things is missing, when the bank account's about to run dry, when mom or dad's in the hospital, son or daughter's in the hospital, we start to feel this insecurity, this anxiety, unhappiness. So here's the thing. Think about like somebody, I don't know, has anybody in here rappelled? Anybody ever done that? I'm not. I'm scared of heights. Think about when you're rappelling, right? You have this rope that you're holding on to. Well, when you feel like you're going too fast, what do? You don't lean forward. That makes you go faster. You lean back. And see, our problem a lot of times, and Israel's problem here, is we're not content to just lean back and trust God that He'll hold our weight. We have to have something else up at the top of the rock wall to hold us up too. We want to get our hands on what we trust. We want to be able to control it. It'd be a lot easier to trust God if we had like some kind of contract with Him, right? We could sit there and we could have like this legal guarantee of what He'd do, like an overdraft protection on our bank account. When we maybe we don't follow the budget right. We can come in and we can say, well, God, I ran out of money this month. I'm gonna overdraft into your bank account, right? Or maybe if we had like a God medical assurance card where, every time I get sick, I'm going to miraculously be healed. You don't get me, and you're poor, you'll be miserable. You grow old, single, your life's going to be terrible. This is what Tim Keller, he's a pastor in New York, this is what he says. Jesus is the only king that if you obtain him will satisfy you, and whom if you fail him will forgive you. So here's the thing this morning, church. Jesus is the one true king that our hearts are all yearning for. All of Israel's hearts were yearning for Saul. What they were looking for was Jesus. And here's where I'm going to turn this back to you, right? We've been talking a lot about Israel this morning. Here's where I want to turn it back to you this morning. Right? We all have to choose a king. In fact, every single one of us sitting in this room right now, we've already chosen a king. So you're either enslaved to something that brings life, or you're enslaved to something that brings death. Now, all earthly kings will disappoint. 1 Samuel chapter 12, when Samuel coronates Saul, he reviewed Israel's history with Saul. He showed them time and time again that God had been faithful, even when the Israelites weren't. You were unbelieving in the wilderness, but God gave you manna. You served idols, and because of that, God let other nations afflict you. But when you called out to God in repentance, He immediately came to help and deliver you. He does the same for us this morning. When we're unfaithful to Him, He never leaves us. He never forsakes us. You couldn't ask for a better king than Jesus. He's a king that not only supplies for you, fulfills, and you're His people, He forgives you and has mercy on you when you fail. Why would we go searching for anything else? He's everything that we need. So this morning I want to offer the chance for you to make the choice that Israel did. The choice of faith. See, here's the thing. We have more to go on than they did. We got a longer history showing that God has always been faithful to His people. Most importantly, this morning we have the cross. We see the ultimate display of God's love and faithfulness to us. God demonstrates His love toward us that while we were still sinners, He died for us. There's no king that you can serve in the grave. But there's a catch here. To follow God, you must step out in faith. Entirely. No controls, no conditions. And most of us, we're okay with stepping out in faith as long as we can keep control. We'll follow God, but with conditions. But God, as long as you do this, if I do this, don't let this happen to me, don't send me there, I'll follow you. And that's not faith or obedience at all, that's rejection. Conditional obedience is utter disobedience. And so this morning, you may be in this boat where you've been serving these other kings for so long. You've been saying, well, God, you can sit on half the throne, and job can sit on the other half, wife and husband can sit on the other half, kids and their activities can sit on the other half. Maybe this morning, some of you may be a little afraid. They just step out completely in faith and say, God, whatever you have for me, whatever you're going to do, I'm going to trust you. I'm just going to follow you all the way. Some of you may be saying, how can I know that God will take care of me? Right? How can I leap out into the unknown and be sure that God will catch me? Just look at the cross. Look at what He's done already. We can look at what Jesus has done for us and we can say, God, you can be completely trusted. What's your heart yearning for? Who is your king? Here's where we'll end this morning. So we all have to choose a king. chosen a king already. You're either enslaved to something that brings life, or you're enslaved to something that brings death. What have you chosen? Let's pray. God, we love you this morning. God, help us to realize, help us to understand this morning that you're the king that our hearts are yearning for. God, we try to replace you with so many things, and nothing else will do. God, we try to replace you with a good name for ourselves. We try to replace you with a big bank account. God, this morning we understand that none of those things can hold us up like you do. So, Father, this morning as we sing, God, I pray that you would open hearts. I pray that you would open eyes, God, where we could see exactly what it is that we're serving. God, you say that if we ask, you'll answer, God. You won't withhold. If we're worshiping something else, God, you'll bring that to life to us. So, Father, this morning we're praying that that's what you'll do. Be with us now as we sing. In Jesus' name, amen. Discipleship. There's somewhere for every single one of you to be at. If you want to come and join us. Don't forget also, we get the offering plates up here and in the back. That money will be going to the Sellers family tomorrow, and cut some of the expenses for hotels and food and stuff like that while Mr. Howard is recovering from his surgeries. Is there anything else we need to address before we leave? Wayne Lott, care to close this prayer, brother?
Father, we thank you for all today you've blessed us with. Father, we just thank you for the word you provided